Hey, Eric Peacock here, Get Fit Lakeville. Ask the Expert on Thursday as we always do it. Usually I do Facebook Live, but I'm doing this a little earlier because I'm going to have some good family time tonight. So I want to talk about two diets that are, or two things that are emerging that people talk about, is the ketogenic diet or the keto diet. I've been hearing a lot of people asking about that. That one's kind of making a resurgence, and intermittent fasting. And a lot of people want to know, are these good ideas for myself in terms of losing weight? I'm going to give you my honest opinion on this and give you a little bit of, physiology, not in real technical terms, and I'll address each one individually. So number one, the keto diet. Basically all you're going to do is consume a lot of fat and protein and no carbohydrates. Now yes, you will lose weight on this initially, but as a long-term strategy, this is not going to work, because here's the problem. When you take carbohydrates out of your diet, your body has to break down fat for energy, which is not really efficient when you're doing high intensity type things, and it'll break down protein as well. So when you starve your body of carbohydrates for a long period of time, you have a real risk of losing muscle tissue. And when you cut carbohydrates, a lot of times carbohydrates can actually help control cortisol, the hormone cortisol. So when you have low carbohydrate diets for long periods of time, typically you're going to produce more cortisol. When you produce cortisol, your body's basically making sugar out of your muscles. We've talked about cortisol before, and is it a long-term strategy? Are you always going to have to go out somewhere and always make sure you never ever eat carbohydrates ever again? And another thing is that glucose, which is broken down carbohydrate, runs your brain. And we typically need about 130 calories of glucose a day to run our brain, and our brain does not work really good on a low carbohydrate diet. So how do you do a ketogenic diet? A good day is if you want to use some of that. My suggestion is you do a couple days low carb, or ketogenic as it's called, where you're doing really low carbohydrate, and then you come back out and you replenish with carbohydrate. Now most people, I'll tell you what, most people aren't ready for this. This can be really tough on people. It's kind of like if you're skiing and you've never been down the bunny hill, meaning you're not doing the fundamental things of nutrition, and you're going right to the black diamond. You're doing right to these extreme things that are more challenging to try to get an extreme result, which doesn't always work. A lot of times it ends up backfiring in the long run. And the other thing with a low carbohydrate diet over time, that can actually reduce your thyroid levels, which is not a good thing either when it comes to weight loss. So you might get some initial results, but most people I've seen try to do the ketogenic diet don't stick to it. They can't stick to it. Just like the Atkins diet back in the 90s and the early 2000s, when people did that, when the low carbohydrate craze kind of first took effect. So I always say it's something you can sustain for the long haul, and most people aren't going to sustain this, especially if you want to do athletic things. Most people want to be stronger, they want to lift more weight, they want to perform better. Pretty hard to perform really well on a ketogenic diet. Now, one little caveat, there are some people that need to be on this. I do have some friends that have kids that have specific medical conditions that helps reduce seizures. So there are some medical reasons to be on a ketogenic diet. But for most general fitness people, it's not a good long-term strategy, and it's once again going to that quick fix mentality. And a lot of the weight you're going to lose on this, frankly, is going to be water weight that's going to come back when you start eating carbohydrates again, because carbohydrates store water in the body, and it's kind of a smoke and mirrors trick. When you cut carbohydrates out, you lose weight. A lot of that is water weight that your body holds in the muscle, along with your glucose, your stored carbohydrates. So once you start eating the carbohydrate again, the weight's going to go up. Doesn't mean you gain fat. It just means your body's holding more water, because you need to when you have glucose in the body. So that's my take on the ketogenic diet. I think a good kind of happy medium is to try to do some carbohydrate cycling. And when you do ketogenic eating is on the days when you typically are less active or you're not working out as hard. And that's typically what we kind of talk about when you bring in like a carb cycling, is to bring it in on those lower activity days, or the days where you're not really doing anything. When you're not going to need those carbohydrates. On the days you're doing high intensity exercise, definitely I would recommend bringing some carbohydrates in, because they'll help fuel your body for that activity. Number two is intermittent fasting. People talk about intermittent fasting a lot. Is this a great weight loss tool? I can say it can be effective depending on your case-by-case basis. So yes, it can be effective if you are a low-stress person. And why I say that is because fasting can increase human growth hormone in their body. Human growth hormone is a hormone that helps you use body fat further, helps burn body fat, basically. Let's just say it that way. But if you're high stress, which in my practice here, when I work with people, most people are under a lot of stress and not sleeping enough and moving at a fast pace. typically what you're going to do, you're going to produce more cortisol versus growth hormone when you do intermittent fasting. So if I'm a high stress person and I'm trying to do some intermittent fasting, I'm probably going to raise my cortisol level up. Just like I talked about the other day, we have to pay attention to cortisol. So by skipping meals, my blood sugar is going to lower, and I'm going to have to use a little more cortisol to get that blood sugar back up to a normal level. Your body's always trying to get that normal, that homeostasis. So intermittent fasting, good idea depending on who you are. So if you're a person that doesn't let a lot of things get to you, you're pretty mellow, you go with the flow, you don't get too stressed out, it might be effective. But if you're typically like most people I know that are under stress, are over-scheduled and under-rested, it could actually raise your cortisol. And once again, why is cortisol so bad? Because it's a short-term hormone for fight or flight, meaning that it thinks we're in a fight with something or we're running away from something. It's meant to be short-term, but a lot of Americans, we're sitting in chronically in that fight or flight state, and we're producing too much of that hormone cortisol, and we're basically, like my friend Dr. Kyle Warren says, you're eating your bicep for breakfast. We don't want to lose that muscle tissue. 25 to 50 calories per pound of muscle. So when we're having high cortisol, we're going to be feeding off our muscle tissue, and we're going to be putting sugar into our body. When we have sugar in our bloodstream, that puts us in a fat storing environment, typically around the midsection. So both of these could backfire on you depending on who you are. Your best bet is to start off with balanced meals, meaning good carbohydrate from whole food sources, balanced with protein and some good fats at every meal, and some vegetables. And a lot of people don't like to eat vegetables, but vegetables do a great job of giving the body things to help the immune system stay strong, fiber, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants to help keep your body from rusting. So starting off with the basics, like I said, if you're skiing, you don't go right to the black diamond, you go to the green circle. So these strategies can be good. I would say, once again, just to sum it up, a ketogenic diet, instead of doing all keto, no carbs ever, is bringing in some low carbohydrate days. If you want to call them keto days, that's fine. Maybe 1 to 3 days at the max. 3 days at the max. I wouldn't go more than 3 days. And use it on lower activity, lower carbohydrate, or lower activity or no activity days. And then intermittent fasting, I would only attempt this if your stress levels are well under control. If you're not, if you're a stressed out person, like probably the majority of this country, probably not the greatest thing to do hormonally. And once again,